My name is Penelope, I'm 32, and until yesterday, I thought I was secure in my childhood home, where I've been caring for my dad since Mum died of cancer 2 years ago. Everything changed when Dad announced he's remarrying Veronica, a woman he met only 6 months ago. I tried to be supportive despite my mixed feelings. Then came the bombshell: Veronica and her 2 teenage children are moving in immediately. I never imagined a stranger would try to erase my existence from my own home. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe. If you've ever had someone try to push you out of a place you belonged. I've always been close with my father, James. At 58, he's built a successful career as an architect, designing beautiful homes for others, while making our own house a haven of warmth and memories. The 3-bedroom craftsman-style house in a quiet neighborhood of Portland has been our family home since I was 5. My mother, Laura, picked out every paint color, planted every rosebush in the garden, and filled each room with comfortable furniture that invited you to sit and stay a while. Growing up, our home was the gathering place where friends congregated after school. Mum would serve her famous chocolate chip cookies, while Dad helped with math homework. Those were golden days filled with laughter and security. My bedroom, with its bay window overlooking the backyard maple tree, was my sanctuary through childhood and adolescence. The walls still hold the memories of teenage dreams and late-night study sessions. When Mum was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer 3 years ago, I didn't hesitate to move back home. I had been living in Seattle building my freelance graphic design business, but family comes first. I packed everything and returned to my childhood bedroom, converting the small den into a home office so I could continue working while helping care for Mum. Those final months were brutal but precious. Dad and I formed a caregiving team, taking shifts, sitting with Mum, managing her medications, and trying to make her comfortable. We became experts at hospital visits, insurance paperwork, and creating moments of joy amid tremendous pain. Mum faced her illness with incredible grace, worrying more about how Dad and I would cope after she was gone than about her own suffering. After she passed, Dad and I clung to each other through the fog of grief. We established new routines: Sunday morning pancakes, watching old movies on Wednesday nights, tending Mum's garden together on weekends. Slowly, we learnt to function in a world without her. Though the house seemed quieter, the rooms somehow larger without her presence filling them. My freelance work provided flexibility, allowing me to be there for Dad while building my client base. I designed logos, marketing materials, and websites for small businesses, often working late into the night to meet deadlines. Dad seemed proud of my growing business, occasionally suggesting I might want to move back to Seattle, but never pushing. I think we both found comfort in our shared space and memories. The first mention of Veronica came casually over dinner. Dad mentioned meeting a nice woman at a colleague's retirement party. I was thrilled, encouraging him to pursue friendship and maybe more. Mum would have wanted him to find companionship. The occasional dinner date became weekly outings, and Dad seemed lighter, smiling more. I was genuinely happy for him. Then came the restaurant meeting. Dad insisted I join them for dinner at Giovanni's mum's favorite Italian place. When I arrived, I found him sitting with an elegantly dressed woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a calculating smile. Veronica extended a manicured hand, her grip firm and cold. "Penelope, I've heard so much about you," she said, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes evaluating me like an item at auction. Throughout dinner, Veronica dominated the conversation, touching Dad's arm possessively, while directing most questions to him rather than engaging with me. When I mentioned Mom's recipe for tiramisu that Giovanni himself had requested, Veronica quickly changed the subject to her recent trip to Tuscany. I noticed Dad steering away from any topics related to Mum or our shared past. Veronica's children made brief appearances in her stories: Zach, her 17-year-old son, a gifted athlete, and Ashley, her 15-year-old daughter, quite the social influencer. Something about her descriptions felt performative, as though she was selling a perfect family narrative. As I drove home that night, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. Dad seemed enchanted, but something about Veronica felt calculated. When I gently mentioned this to him, suggesting perhaps they were moving quickly, his response surprised me. "You don't know her like I do, Penny," he said, using Mum's old nickname for me. "Veronica understands me. She makes me feel alive again." I swallowed my concerns and tried to be supportive. After all, Dad deserved happiness, and perhaps my hesitation was simply protectiveness or resistance to change. I decided to give Veronica a fair chance, never imagining how quickly our lives would transform. 6 months after they started dating, Dad announced over breakfast that he had proposed, and Veronica had accepted. Before I could process this, he added that Veronica and her children would be moving in the following weekend. No discussion, no consideration of how this might impact me. Just a fait accompli presented over toast and coffee. I know it's sudden, he said, but at my age, why wait? We're not getting any younger. I forced a smile and offered congratulations, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. Not only was my father rushing into marriage with a woman he barely knew, but our peaceful home was about to be invaded by strangers. Little did I know this was just the beginning of Veronica's plan to claim both my father and my home for herself. Moving day arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. 3 burly movers trudged through our front door, carrying designer furniture boxes labelled in precise handwriting and more shoes than I'd seen outside a department store. Veronica directed traffic like a field marshal, pointing and commanding with absolute authority. "The floral armchair needs to go," she instructed my father, gesturing toward my mother's reading chair. "It doesn't match my sectional." Dad hesitated just briefly before nodding agreement. I watched stomach clenching as the chair where Mom had nursed me through childhood illnesses and read countless bedtime stories was unceremoniously carried to the garage. Within hours, our cozy home transformed into something from an upscale catalogue, sleek, coordinated, and stripped of personality. Family photos were repositioned or removed entirely. Mum's hand-knitted throw blankets disappeared. The kitchen tools she had collected over decades were boxed up to make room for Veronica's expensive copper cookware. While helping unpack books in the living room, I came across a silver frame containing a photo of Mum, Dad, and me at Lake Oswego, taken the summer before her diagnosis. It was one of my favourites, capturing a moment of perfect happiness before our world changed. As I found a place for it on the bookshelf, Veronica brushed past, knocking it from my hands. The glass shattered across the hardwood floor. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Perhaps it's a sign we should focus on making new memories rather than dwelling on the past." Dad, carrying in boxes from the moving truck, missed the entire interaction. Later that afternoon, I overheard Veronica talking to Ashley as they arranged items in the master bathroom. "This house needs a complete overhaul, but we'll tackle it bit by bit," she said. "And don't worry about your space. Once we convert the guest room into your dream bedroom, you'll love it here." The guest room she referred to was my bedroom, where I'd been sleeping every night while caring for my father. The casual way she erased my presence felt like a physical blow. That evening, Veronica prepared our first family dinner, a complicated Mediterranean spread that highlighted my father's simple cooking by comparison. Seating arrangements weren't accidental. Veronica at the head of the table, where Mum used to sit, Dad at the other end, her children on one side and me alone on the other. Zach Tor, with his mother's calculating eyes, answered questions with minimal effort, clearly bored by the forced family scenario. When Dad asked about his interests, he merely shrugged and said, "Sports, I guess, and parties." Ashley, petite, with carefully applied makeup that made her look older than 15, remained glued to her phone throughout dinner, occasionally showing her mother something on the screen that made them both laugh without explanation. "Ashley has quite the following on social media," Veronica boasted. "Brands have already approached her for partnerships." I attempted conversation, asking Ashley about school subjects she enjoyed, but received only a dismissive "nothing really" before she returned to scrolling. After dinner, I loaded the dishwasher as I always did, only to have Veronica appear at my elbow. "That's not how I organize a dishwasher," she said, rearranging everything I'd placed. "Efficiency is important in running a household properly." The implication that I hadn't been running our household properly stung. When I left the kitchen, I overheard her speaking to my father in the living room. "James, I'm concerned about Penelope. Don't you think it's unusual for a woman her age to still be living at home? It seems she's become too dependent on you." I didn't stay to hear my father's response, retreating to my bedroom, where even there things had been subtly altered. My bookshelf had been partially cleared to make room for storage boxes labelled seasonal decor. The quilt my grandmother had made me had been replaced with a generic white duvet. The space felt less mine already. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. My belongings were gradually relocated to smaller spaces. My home office was deemed too central for my hobby way, with Veronica suggesting I could work from my bedroom instead, as the office would make a perfect study area for Zach. Zach himself made no effort to adapt to existing household rhythms. He played video games at full volume until 3 a.m, left wet towels on bathroom floors, and raided the refrigerator without consideration for meal plans. When I gently mentioned house rules about cleaning up after oneself, he laughed. My mum makes the rules now, he said with a smirk. You should probably get used to it. Ashley maintained her cold shoulder, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary. I once offered to help her with an English assignment I spotted her working on mentioning my literature minor in college. Her response was cutting. No offense, but I don't need help from someone whose career is making pictures on a computer. One Saturday morning, I went to the garage, looking for gardening tools, planning to tend to Mom's rose bushes, as I did weekly. I found her carefully organised garden basket dumped unceremoniously behind boxes of Christmas decorations. Her pruning shears rusted from being left in the rain. When I brought this up to Dad, he seemed distracted. Veronica has hired landscapers to redesign the yard next month, he said. Maybe it's time to let that go. Let that go. Those 3 words echoed painfully. Mum's roses weren't just plants. They were her legacy, carefully tended specimens she'd nurtured for 15 years. Now they were to be replaced with whatever trendy landscaping Veronica preferred. It was happening so gradually, yet so quickly, my mother's presence, and now mine, being systematically erased from our home. The living room transformation happened while I was meeting a client across town. I returned to find every familiar piece replaced our comfortable sectional, where the 3 of us had watched countless movies gone the coffee table, where Mom and I had completed jigsaw puzzles, vanished, even the wall colour changed from warm sage to stark white. Most noticeably, the gallery wall of family photos had been replaced with abstract art in metallic frames. Photos spanning decades of family history, my parents' wedding, my graduation, our national park road trips all removed. The only photographs remaining featured Dad alone or with Veronica. We needed a clean, contemporary look, Veronica explained when she saw my expression. All those mismatched frames were chaotic. I've stored the old photos in the attic if you want them. That night at dinner, Dad complimented the new decor effusively. Veronica has such a good eye. The place looks like something from a magazine. I pushed salmon around my plate, remembering how this room had once contained our history, not just furniture. It certainly looks different, I managed. My work suffered as the house became increasingly hostile territory. My bedroom-turned office offered little separation between personal and professional space. Conference calls were interrupted by Ashley's TikTok dance music or Zach shouting at video games. Concentration became impossible in the constant noise. The breaking point came when I returned from a coffee break to find Zach at my computer. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed at seeing him scrolling through my files. "Needed to print something for school," he said without apology. "Your printer's better than ours." I discovered later he had closed several of my project files without saving changes. Hours of work lost. A deadline for an important restaurant client missed. When I approached my father about establishing boundaries, Veronica interjected. "Boys will be boys, Penelope. Surely your little designs can be redone. Family needs to share." Dad nodded in agreement, missing or ignoring how she had diminished my professional work. Veronica's territorial behaviour extended beyond redecorating. She began suggesting with increasing frequency and decreasing subtlety that I should find my own place. "At your age, I had my own apartment and was fully independent," she mentioned over breakfast. "There's a lovely complex just 20 minutes away with reasonable rent." "Penelope needs to spread her wings," she told my father when she thought I couldn't hear. "It's not healthy for her to be so attached to her childhood home." The irony of her children moving into my childhood home apparently escaped her. My suspicions about Veronica going through my things were confirmed when I returned early from a grocery run and found her in my room, my desk drawer open, examining my mother's jewellery box. "I was looking for extra hangers," she claimed, though the closet was across the room from my desk. "That jewellery was my mother's," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, I can tell. Rather dated pieces. You should consider having them redesigned into something more contemporary." She placed the box down carelessly and left without apologising for the invasion. That weekend, Veronica hosted dinner for her sister's family. I was introduced as James's daughter who's staying with us temporarily. Her sister Catherine gave me a pitying look. "Still finding your way, are you? That must be difficult at your age." Throughout dinner, Veronica referred to herself as the lady of the house, giving tours and discussing renovation plans as though she had lived there for years rather than weeks. When her brother-in-law admired a stained glass lamp in the hallway, a piece Dad and Mum had discovered on their 20th anniversary trip, Veronica said, "Thank you, I found it at a charming little shop in Vermont." The appropriation of not just the physical space, but our family history left me speechless. My childhood friend Maria noticed the changes immediately when she visited for coffee. We sat in the kitchen, the one room Veronica hadn't completely overhauled yet, though she had plans for granite countertops and stainless appliances. "Penny, what's happening here?" Maria asked quietly. "This doesn't feel like your home anymore." "It isn't," I admitted. "It's becoming Veronica's showcase." "And your dad is okay with all this?" I shrugged helplessly. "He seems happy. He laughs more with her. Maybe this is what he needs." Maria reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "But what about what you need? You put your life on hold to care for both your parents. You deserve better than being edged out of your own home." Her words resonated, but left me uncertain what to do. Confronting the situation might force my father to choose, and I feared his choice wouldn't be me. That evening, I discovered Mom's favourite crystal vase, a wedding gift from her grandmother, broken in the trash. When I asked Veronica about it, she claimed it had been an accident during dusting. "It was rather old-fashioned anyway," she said dismissively. "I've ordered a gorgeous Murano glass piece to replace it." The systematic erasure of my mother from the home she had created was nearly complete, and with it, I felt my own presence becoming increasingly ghost-like, tolerated but unwanted in what had once been my sanctuary. The lock on my bedroom door had always been more theoretical than functional, a simple privacy knob easily opened with a straight edge. I rarely used it, having no reason for such boundaries in our family home. That changed after discovering Veronica in my room uninvited. Returning from a morning run, I immediately sensed something amiss. My dresser drawers were slightly ajar, desk papers, rearranged closet door not quite closed. The distinct scent of Veronica's expensive perfume lingered in the air. Nothing seemed obviously missing, but the violation of privacy left me deeply unsettled. That evening, I installed a simple lock, nothing elaborate, just enough to protect my personal space. The next day, it had been removed, the small screw holes in the door filled with wood putty. "Security isn't necessary in a family home," Veronica explained smoothly when confronted. "It suggests distrust, which hurts your father's feelings." Dad, standing beside her, nodded in solemn agreement. "We're all family now, Penny. Locks create barriers." 3 days later, I discovered what Veronica had likely been searching for. My mother's jewelry box, kept in my desk drawer, was missing several pieces. Most notably, her engagement ring, which Dad had given me after the funeral, and a pair of sapphire earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Heart-pounding, I approached Veronica in the kitchen where she was arranging flowers. Not Mum's roses, which had been removed, but store-bought lilies that filled the room with an overpowering scent. "Have you seen Mum's engagement ring? It's missing from my jewelry box." Veronica didn't look up from her arrangement. "Why would I have seen your mother's old ring?" "Because it's missing along with the sapphire earrings, and you've been in my room without permission." This got my father's attention. He entered from the living room, brow furrowed. "Penny, what are you suggesting?" Before I could answer, Veronica turned to him, eyes wide with hurt. "James, she's accusing me of theft, after everything I've done to make this house a proper home again." "I'm not accusing anyone," I said carefully. "I'm just asking if anyone has seen these very meaningful items that are suddenly missing." "Perhaps you misplaced them," Veronica suggested, "or sold them without remembering. You've seemed rather scattered lately working those long hours." Dad placed a protective arm around Veronica's shoulders. "Penny, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Why don't you look again more carefully? Veronica would never take something that belongs to you." The way he immediately took her side stung more than the missing jewelry. Later that evening, as I methodically searched my room again, Dad knocked on my door. "Honey, I'm worried about you," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "You've been under a lot of stress with work and these accusations." "It's not like you." "Dad, I know where I kept Mum's ring. I look at it every night before bed." He sighed heavily. "Grief makes us hold on to things sometimes. Maybe it's time to let go a little." Those words again, let go. As if my mother was something to be discarded rather than remembered. As if my place in this home was contingent on erasing her. The next morning, Veronica approached me with a catalogue open to home gym equipment. "James and I have been discussing ways to use the space more efficiently," she said, pointing to sleek treadmills and weight systems. "Since you're working so much, we thought converting this room to a home gym would benefit everyone." "This room," I echoed. "Your bedroom, yes. There's a charming little studio apartment complex on Maple Street that has vacancies. Perfect starter place for someone your age." The casual way she suggested displacing me from my home left me speechless. Before I could form a response, she added, "We need to move forward as a family, and that means making this house work for all of us, who will be here long term." Dang. That evening, I returned from picking up dinner to overhear Veronica speaking to her children in the kitchen. "Just be patient a little longer," she was saying. "Once she's gone, you can each have proper spaces. Zach, you'll have the office for your gaming setup, and Ashley will convert Penelope's room into the perfect bedroom for you. The house will be just ours soon." My father wasn't home to hear this naked admission of her plans. When I confronted her, Veronica merely smiled. "You misunderstood, dear. I meant that once you're ready to move on with your adult life, we'll repurpose the space. That's only natural." That night, Dad announced at dinner that he and Veronica were planning to redecorate my bedroom. "We thought a fresh look might help everyone adjust," he said cheerfully, missing the triumphant glance Veronica shot in my direction. "Veronica has some wonderful ideas for brightening up that space." "I still live in that space," I reminded him. "Of course, for now," he agreed. "But eventually, you'll want your own place, and will need guest space for when Catherine and her family visit." The message couldn't have been clearer. My presence was now considered temporary in the home where I'd spent most of my life, and the past 3 years caring for my parents. The final blow came 2 days later. After a lunch meeting with a potential client, I returned home to find cardboard boxes stacked in the hallway outside my bedroom. My name was written on them in Veronica's precise handwriting. Opening my door revealed half-empty bookshelves, dresser drawers pulled out, and closet partially emptied. "What is happening?" I demanded, finding Veronica directing Ashley on how to wrap framed photos in bubble wrap. "We're helping you get organized for your move," Veronica explained calmly. "The apartment on Maple Street had a cancellation. You can move in next week." "I haven't agreed to any move," I said, my voice shaking. "This is my home. It's your father's home," she corrected. "And now mine. We need the space, and you need to start your independent life. It's really for the best, Penelope." In that moment, looking at this stranger dismantling my life without consent, I realized the true extent of her manipulation. This wasn't about space or family dynamics. This was a systematic campaign to erase any trace of the life that existed before her arrival, including me. "I've found the perfect solution to our space issue," Veronica announced when my father returned home that evening. She gestured to the boxes in the hallway, like they were a gift rather than an eviction. "Penelope can move into that charming apartment complex next week. I've already spoken to the manager." Dad looked confused, glancing between the boxes and me. "I thought we were just discussing possibilities." "We need to be decisive, James. Penelope is 32. It's time for her to establish her own household, and we need the room for Ashley. The poor girl has been making do with the smallest bedroom." I stood frozen, waiting for my father to object to remind his wife that this was my home too. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Maybe it is time, Penny," he said gently. "You've put your life on hold long enough. Your mother wouldn't want that." The mention of my mother from the man who had been systematically erasing her memory broke something in me. "Don't you dare tell me what Mum would want," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "She would never have pushed me out of my home." Veronica stepped between us, a protective gesture that painted me as the aggressor. "This emotional reaction proves my point. You're too attached to this house, to the past. It's not healthy. What's not healthy is how quickly you've taken control of everything," I countered. 6 months of dating, and suddenly you're remaking Dad's entire life, erasing Mum from every corner, making decisions about my living situation without even consulting me. "I am trying to help this family move forward," Veronica insisted, her voice rising. "All I've encountered is resistance and resentment from you." Dad placed his hands on Veronica's shoulders. "Penny, that's enough. Veronica has only been trying to make a comfortable home for all of us." "For her family," I corrected. "Not for me. Never for me." When my father didn't contradict this, the full weight of his betrayal crashed over me. He was choosing his new wife over the daughter who had put her life on pause to care for him and Mom. Veronica, sensing her advantage, continued softly. "James, I've tried to be patient, but Penelope clearly resents my presence. She doesn't want to move forward. She wants to keep this house as a shrine to Laura, and you locked in grief with her." "Gay." My father's expression hardened at this manipulation. "Is that true, Penny? Have you been trying to prevent me from finding happiness again?" "Of course not. I encouraged you to date to find companionship. But this isn't about your happiness anymore. It's about Veronica taking everything, including my home. "It's my house," Dad said firmly, "and I've decided it's time for you to find your own place. Veronica has kindly researched options that would work with your budget." The finality in his tone struck me like a physical blow. After everything we'd been through together, after all the nights sitting with Mom, after the shared grief and healing, he was siding with a woman he barely knew over his own daughter. "I see," I said, my voice hollow. "So that's it. 3 years of caring for this family, and I'm discarded the moment I'm inconvenient." Dad began to object, but Veronica interjected, "No one is discarding you, Penelope. We're encouraging your independence. And frankly, it's time to stop dwelling on the past. Laura is gone. The constant reminders were making it impossible for James to heal. The reminders you're so eager to remove are my mother," I said. "And I'm one of those reminders, aren't I? That's why you've been trying to get rid of me from day one." "Don't be ridiculous." Veronica snapped, her pleasant mask slipping for the first time. "This victim mentality is exactly why you need to stand on your own 2 feet. Zach chose that moment to walk through the front door, immediately sensing the tension. Rather than retreating, he smirked. Having the talk finally about time. "I need a proper gaming room, not some closet." "Zach, not now," Veronica warned, but the damage was done. "You've promised my room to him too?" I asked incredulously. "What else have you promised them? Dad's workshop, Mum's garden." "This isn't productive," my father interrupted. "The decision is made, Penny. I'll help you financially for a few months until you're settled." I looked at him, this stranger wearing my father's face, and realized further argument was futile. Without another word, I grabbed my car keys and laptop bag and walked out the front door. Behind me, I heard Veronica's soothing voice. "It's for the best, James. She needs this push to grow up." I drove straight to Maria's apartment, tears blurring the familiar streets. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a fierce hug. "He's choosing her," I sobbed into her shoulder. "After everything, he's letting her push me out." Maria led me to her couch, handed me tissues, and listened as I poured out the entire story. The systematic erasure of my mother, the territorial claiming of space, the missing jewelry, and finally the packed boxes and eviction notice, disguised as concern for my independence. "That's not independence, that's abandonment," Maria said firmly. "And it's about her isolating your father, not about what's best for anyone." "He can't see it," I said, exhaustion washing over me. "He's completely under her spell." "Men who've lost spouses are particularly vulnerable to manipulation," Maria said thoughtfully. "My aunt is a family therapist, and she says they often rush into relationships to avoid grief. These relationships can become controlling, because the man fears being alone again. So what do I do? Just accept that I've lost my father and my home in one swoop?" Maria's expression hardened with determination. "No, you fight. Not with tears or accusations, but with facts. If Veronica is who I think she is, a calculated opportunist, there will be evidence, and your father deserves to know exactly who he's married." That night, sleeping on Maria's pull-out couch, I hit emotional rock bottom. I felt abandoned by the one person I thought would never betray me homeless, despite years of sacrifice, and utterly alone. As dawn broke, however, something shifted inside me. The grief and shock transformed into resolve. I might have lost this battle, but the war for my father's well-being was just beginning. "We need to be strategic," Maria said the next morning over coffee. "Emotional appeals clearly aren't working. Your father is too enchanted to see what's happening." "He's not himself," I agreed. "Dad has always been logical, thoughtful. He never would have let anyone pack up my belongings without discussion before. Classic isolation technique." Maria nodded. "First separate him from physical reminders of his past life, then from people who knew him before. Have you noticed him seeing less of his friends?" The question triggered a realization. His Thursday poker game with Bill and Howard hasn't happened since Veronica moved in, and he used to have lunch weekly with his business partner Richard. "Start there," Maria advised. "Reconnect with his social circle. Find out what they've observed." Over the next week, I conducted careful reconnaissance while staying at Maria's apartment. Each day, I documented another piece of the puzzle that was Veronica's takeover. First, I contacted Bill Jackson, my father's friend of 20 years and poker buddy. He seemed surprised to hear from me. "Penny, good to hear your voice. How's life in your new place? Your dad mentioned you'd moved out to pursue career opportunities." This fabrication about my choice to leave confirmed Veronica was controlling the narrative. When I asked about the poker games, Bill sighed. "They've been temporarily suspended for 2 months now. Veronica mentioned renovating the den where we played." Then it was James being too busy with blending the families. I've barely seen him since the quick wedding. Howard and Richard shared similar stories of cancelled plans and unreturned calls. Each had been fed slightly different explanations for my father's sudden unavailability, all centering around family adjustments and Veronica's needs. Next, I researched Veronica herself, starting with social media. Her carefully curated profiles showed a woman who moved frequently, always upgrading to more affluent areas. Old photos revealed previous relationships with at least 2 older, professionally successful men before my father. A deeper internet search uncovered a 3-year-old article in a local newspaper about a contentious divorce between Veronica and businessman Walter Simmons, who claimed financial manipulation. The case was settled privately. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. While getting coffee at a shop near Dad's office, I ran into his administrative assistant, Jennifer, who had worked with him for 15 years. "Penny, I was so sorry to hear about your move. Such a sudden decision." After explaining what had really happened, Jennifer's expression grew troubled. "I've been concerned," she admitted. "Your father added Veronica to his business accounts last month as an authorized user, and she's been coming to the office frequently, rescheduling his appointments, even suggesting he consider early retirement to enjoy life. I thought it seemed rushed, especially given how much he loves his work." This financial connection alarmed me more than anything. Dad had built his architectural firm from nothing, and now Veronica had access to his business assets. At Maria's suggestion, I visited our family lawyer, Mr. Reeves, who had handled my parents' will and estate planning. He confirmed my suspicions about the house. "The property was purchased jointly by your parents," he explained. "When your mother passed, her half transferred to you, not to your father, as many assume. Legally speaking, you own 50% of that house. No one can force you to leave without buying out your interest." This revelation was both shocking and empowering. All this time, Veronica had been trying to evict me from property I partially owned. My next breakthrough came unexpectedly through Ashley, Veronica's daughter. I encountered her at the mall food court, sitting alone, absorbed in her phone. When she noticed me, I expected the same cold shoulder, but instead she hesitated, then gestured for me to sit. "My mum's being awful to you," she said without preamble. I wanted to say sorry. Surprised by this overture, I proceeded cautiously. "Thank you. That means a lot." "She does this every time," Ashley continued, eyes downcast. "Finds some rich guy, makes him think she's perfect, then takes over everything." "Every time?" Ashley nodded. "3 times now. Walter was the longest, almost 4 years. Your dad seems nice, though. Nicer than the others." This confirmation of Veronica's pattern was valuable, but Ashley's next revelation proved even more significant. She pulled up text messages on her phone, showing a conversation with her mother from before they'd even moved in. "First we get settled, then we convince him she needs more space. With her mother's death so recent, he'll feel guilty enough to push her out. Once she's gone, we can work on the house sale. Waterfront property in this market will set us up nicely." I stared at the messages, feeling sick. "She's planning to sell our house," Ashley nodded. "Once she gets your dad to retire and move somewhere smaller. She already has a realtor friend lined up. She calls it her 5-year exit strategy. It's why we had to rush the wedding." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I was deeply grateful she was. Ashley looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "Because I'm tired of moving, tired of watching her use people. And because you lost your mom. My dad left when I was little. I know what that's like." With Ashley's evidence added to my growing file, I now had a clear picture of Veronica's true intentions. She had targeted my grieving father, rushed him into marriage, isolated him from friends and family, and was systematically gaining control of his finances, with the ultimate goal of selling our family home for profit. The final piece came from Dad's longtime friend and business partner, Richard, who called me after our initial conversation. "Penny, I've been thinking about what you said. James has changed dramatically these past months. Last week, Veronica came to the office suggesting he sell his partnership stake to fund their dream retirement. He's only 58 in the prime of his career. Something isn't right." Armed with this comprehensive evidence, I contacted Mr. Reeves again to discuss legal options. He advised a formal intervention with documentation of all findings, including my legal co-ownership of the house. With his help, I prepared a careful presentation of facts, not accusations, that would hopefully open my father's eyes to the manipulation he'd fallen victim to. 3 weeks after being forced from my home, I was ready to fight not just for my place in it, but for my father's financial security and emotional well-being. I chose a Sunday morning for the intervention, knowing Veronica took weekly brunch with her sister. Richard offered his home as neutral territory, inviting Dad over, ostensibly to discuss business matters. Bill and Howard would be there as supporting witnesses along with Mr. Reeves to address legal questions. When Dad arrived at Richard's, his expression shifted from confusion to wariness, seeing all of us gathered. "What's this about?" he asked, remaining standing by the door. "I have plans with Veronica later." James, Richard said gently, "We need to talk about some concerning patterns we've observed. Please just listen before making any judgments." Reluctantly, Dad sat his posture defensive. I began the presentation we'd carefully prepared, starting with the documented timeline of changes since Veronica's arrival, the progressive isolation from friends and family, the financial entanglements, the rush to marriage after only 6 months of dating. "Dad, look at your calendar from last year compared to now," I said, showing printouts of his schedule. "You've cancelled 87% of regular social engagement since meeting Veronica." Bill added, "James, when was the last time we played poker or watched a game together? Every invitation is declined with a different excuse, all involving Veronica's needs or preferences." Howard, the most straightforward of the group, cut to the chase. "She's isolating you, James. Classic controlling behaviour. We've all seen it happen to other friends." "Never thought you'd fall for it." Dad's expression remained stony. "So my daughter has convinced my friends to gang up on my wife. How is this supposed to help anything?" "This isn't about ganging up," Richard said firmly. "This is about protecting you from someone who has a documented history of financially exploiting partners." We presented the newspaper article about Veronica's contentious divorce, the pattern of relationships with successful older men, followed by significant financial gain, and Jennifer's testimony about Veronica's involvement in Dad's business affairs. Throughout the presentation, Dad's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and confusion. When we reached Ashley's text messages revealing the plan to eventually sell our family home, he finally spoke. "This could be fabricated. Ashley is a teenager with an active imagination. She came to me, Dad. She's tired of watching her mother use people." Mr. Reeves then addressed the legal aspects. "James, were you aware that Penelope legally owns 50% of your home? It was jointly purchased by you and Laura's half transferred to Penelope upon her death." This revelation visibly shocked him. "That can't be right. I would remember something that significant." "The paperwork was handled during Laura's illness," Mr. Reeves explained gently. "You were understandably focused on her care, but the legal documentation is clear. Which means," I added, "Veronica has been trying to evict me from property I legally co-own." Dad sat in stunned silence, processing this information. Finally, he looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. "Penny, I never intended. I thought you wanted independence. Veronica said you'd expressed feeling stifled that you wanted your own place, but felt obligated to stay." "I never said anything remotely like that," I replied softly. "Dad, I stayed because I wanted to, because we were helping each other heal after Mom." He buried his face in his hands, shoulders slumping. "I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I?" Richard placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "You were vulnerable after losing Laura. Veronica recognized that vulnerability and exploited it. You're not the first, and unfortunately won't be the last." We gave Dad space to absorb everything, answering his questions as they came. By the time Veronica called, wondering where he was, a transformation had occurred. He asked to put the call on speaker and calmly informed her he'd be staying at Richard's for a few days to reassess our situation. Her immediate response was telling demands to know who he was, with accusations about me manipulating him, threats about what would happen if he didn't come home immediately. "I think I've heard enough," Dad said, ending the call. "What do we do now, Mr. Ishii?" Reeves outlined the next steps, documenting all financial transactions since Veronica's arrival, changing account access passwords, and preparing for a confrontation with legal representation present. 2 days later, that confrontation took place in our living room. Veronica arrived expecting a simple discussion about Dad's strange behaviour, only to find Mr. Reeves' dad and me waiting. Her attempted embrace of my father was met with a stiff response. "Sit down, Veronica. We need to talk about your plans for our future." "What plans, darling? I only want what's best for us." Her voice maintained its syrupy sweetness, but her eyes darted nervously to the lawyer. "Plans to sell this house within 5 years," Dad said flatly. Plans to convince me to retire early and liquidate my business assets. Veronica's expression flickered before settling on wounded innocence. Who's been feeding you these lies? It's Penelope, isn't it? She's never accepted me, never wanted you to move on after Laura. Actually, I interjected, sliding Ashley's text messages across the coffee table. It was your daughter who shared your 5-year exit strategy. The colour drained from Veronica's face as she read the messages. Ashley's imagination gets carried away. She misunderstood private conversations. Like conversations about accessing my business accounts, Dad pressed, or discussions about liquidating assets I've spent 30 years building. As the evidence mounted financial records showing unusual transfers documented instances of isolating Dad from his support network, the pattern of similar behaviour in previous relationships, Veronica's mask cracked completely. You were wasting your life in this mausoleum to your dead wife, she snapped, all pretense abandoned. I was helping you move forward, build something new. By erasing every trace of my wife, by pushing out my daughter, by planning to sell the home we built together. Dad's voice remained steady, but I could see the pain beneath his controlled exterior. Mr. Reeves interrupted the escalating emotions with legal facts. Ms. Hartford, you should know that Penelope legally owns 50% of this property. Your attempts to remove her constitute an infringement of her property rights. Furthermore, your accessing of Mr. Wilson's business accounts without proper authorization raises significant concerns. The revelation about my co-ownership was clearly news to Veronica. Her calculated mask slipped entirely, revealing the cold opportunist beneath. This is absurd, she spat. I am his wife. She's just a grown daughter who refuses to leave the nest. A marriage entered into under false pretenses with documented intent to exploit financially can be annulled, Mr. Reeves replied calmly. We have sufficient evidence to pursue that course if necessary. Dad looked at the woman he'd married, seeing her clearly for the first time. I want you out of this house by tomorrow evening, you and your children. Any attempt to remove items that aren't personally yours will result in theft charges. Veronica's face contorted with fury. You'll regret this, James. No one discards me. Actually, Dad said quietly, I believe that's exactly what you planned to do to me once you'd extracted everything of value. After a few more legal warnings from Mr. Reeves, Veronica stormed out to pack essentials. Dad and I sat in stunned silence, the weight of what had happened and what had nearly happened settling over us. I'm so sorry, Penny, he finally said, voice breaking. I was blind, so desperate not to be alone that I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me. Grief makes us vulnerable, I said, echoing what so many had told me. She knew exactly how to exploit that. The following day was tense as Veronica and her children packed under the watchful eye of a private security officer Mr. Reeves had arranged. Ashley met my gaze briefly as they loaded the car, a small nod of acknowledgement passing between us. I hoped she might find stability after this latest upheaval in her young life. As Veronica's car disappeared down the driveway, Dad and I stood in the doorway of our home, still ours, not hers, and began the long process of reclaiming what had nearly been lost. The first week after Veronica left was awkward and painful. Dad and I moved carefully around each other, the betrayal and hurt still raw between us. We began with practical matters, changing locks, resetting passwords on all accounts, documenting any financial irregularities for potential legal action. Physical spaces needed reclaiming too. Together, we retrieved Mum's reading chair from the garage, cleaned and restored it to its place by the living room window. We unpacked boxes of family photos, rehung the gallery wall, and brought Mum's garden tools back to their proper shed. Finding Mum's missing jewellery proved more challenging. The engagement ring and sapphire earrings were gone, likely taken by Veronica before her departure. The loss stung, but we focused on what could be recovered rather than what was lost. The more difficult work came in rebuilding trust between us. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Dad knocked on my bedroom door, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate, our old ritual for difficult conversations. Can we talk, Penny? He asked, voice uncertain. I nodded, making space for him on the window seat. We sat in silence for a moment, watching rain trace patterns down the glass. I failed you, he finally said. After everything you did for this family, I let someone push you out of your own home. You were grieving, I offered, though the hurt hadn't fully healed. That's no excuse. Your mother would be so disappointed in how I handled everything. The mention of Mum opened a door we'd both been afraid to approach. You tried to erase her, I said quietly. All her things, her garden, her memory. Dad's hands trembled around his mug. I thought it would hurt less if I couldn't see reminders everywhere. Veronica convinced me that moving forward meant leaving everything behind, including memories. But Mom is part of who we are. Erasing her doesn't help us heal. It just creates a different kind of pain. I understand that now, he said, tears gathering in his eyes. When I saw you bring her chair back in, I realized how much I'd missed it. Missed her. Missed us as we were. That conversation marked the beginning of genuine healing. Dad started grief counseling, something he'd resisted after Mum's death. His therapist helped him understand how his unprocessed grief had made him vulnerable to Veronica's manipulation. I rushed into that relationship to avoid feeling the emptiness, he admitted after one session. I was so afraid of being alone that I ignored every warning sign. Gradually, our home reclaimed its warmth. Not by erasing the changes or pretending the intrusion hadn't happened, but by thoughtfully choosing what to keep and what to restore. Some of Veronica's decorating choices actually improved the space. Others we gladly reversed. Most importantly, we made room for Mum's memory without turning the house into a shrine. Her photos returned to places of honor alongside new images that reflected our continuing lives. Her garden flourished again under our combined care. Our relationship evolved too. The betrayal had forced us both to recognize unhealthy patterns. Dad had seen me as perpetually needing his protection. I had sometimes enabled his avoidance of difficult emotions. 3 months after Veronica's departure, I found an apartment I actually wanted, not because I was being pushed out, but because it was time for my own space. Located just 15 minutes away, it offered room for a proper home office and studio for my expanding business. You don't have to move, Dad said when I showed him the listing. This will always be your home. I know, I assured him. That's why I feel ready to create my own space now. Because I'm choosing it, not being forced into it. He helped me move, build furniture, and hang artwork. We established new routines, Sunday dinners at the family home, Wednesday movie nights at my apartment. His poker games resumed, and he reconnected with friends who had been sidelined during Veronica's reign. 6 months after the confrontation, my graphic design business was thriving. The adversity had pushed me to pursue larger clients and more challenging projects. Dad's architectural practice continued strong, with no plans for early retirement in sight. The most profound change was in how we honored Mum's memory. Rather than avoiding mentions of her or hiding her belongings, we found comfort in sharing stories, looking at old photos, and recognizing her continuing influence in our lives. Your mother would be so proud of how you stood up for yourself. Dad told me one evening as we tended the rose garden together. She always said you had her backbone. And your strategic mind, I added carefully, pruning a climbing rose. She also said you were the most loyal person she'd ever known. I broke that loyalty, he said quietly. No, I corrected him. You got temporarily lost in grief, but you found your way back. That's what matters. The experience changed me profoundly. I learned that sometimes protecting family means standing firm against threats, even when it's painful. I discovered my own strength and resilience in fighting for what mattered. Most importantly, I realized that true healing doesn't come from erasing the past, but from honoring it while still moving forward. Looking back now, I understand that what Veronica nearly destroyed wasn't just our home or financial security, but the authentic connection to our shared history. By trying to erase my mother's presence, she almost severed the continuity that helps us make sense of our lives. Our story doesn't have a perfect fairy tale ending. The legal annulment process was messy. Some of Mum's treasured items never returned. Dad still has moments of guilt and self-recrimination. But we've rebuilt something genuine and strong from the ruins of betrayal, a relationship based on truth rather than illusion. If you're facing a similar situation, a loved one being manipulated, a home being taken, memories being erased, remember that standing up for truth matters even when it's difficult. Healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about integrating it honestly into your continuing story. Has anyone tried to push you out of a place where you belonged? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve to keep their place in their own life story. Thank you for listening to my journey from heartbreak to healing. Sometimes the family we fight hardest to protect includes ourselves.